Well, good afternoon and thanks for being with us. We're going to begin this hour with breaking news. And the British technology company Dyson, famous for its vacuum cleaners, has announced that it is going to cut around 1,000 jobs. The company employs around 3,500 people in Britain, mainly at its site in Malmesbury in Wiltshire. Let's bring in our business presenter, Ian King, for more on this from the city. Ian, was this expected?
Well, I think you can say that if you'd looked at the tea leaves quite closely at what was going on in Dyson, it was certainly possible because the company has a relatively new chief executive, Hanno Kierna. He only joined the business in February this year from Tata, the parent company, of course, of Jaguar Land Rover. And it's not unusual for a new chief executive, once they've got their feet under the desk, to start looking at the business and assessing its staffing needs, because obviously headcount is a crucial part of any business. Now, we understand that this is part of a wider review of staffing numbers globally in Dyson. The company employs some 15,000 people worldwide, and the UK is merely being caught up in part of this sort of overall planning for Dyson's future headcount needs. Now, I've got a statement that I can read you from Hanno Kierna, the new Dyson chief executive. He says, "We have grown quickly, and like all companies, we review our global structures from time to time in order to ensure we're prepared for the future. As such, we are proposing changes to our organisation which may result in redundancies. Dyson operates in increasingly fierce and competitive global markets in which the pace of innovation and change is only accelerating. We know we always need to be entrepreneurial and agile, principles that are not new to Dyson. Decisions which impact close and talented colleagues are also always incredibly painful. Those whose roles are at risk of redundancy as a result of the proposals will be supported through the process." Now, so there's a couple of points to make on the back of that statement. One is that I say Dyson has a relatively new chief executive who naturally will be looking at the staffing requirements of the business over the last few years. The other point to make there is that reference to it operating in very, very competitive markets is pretty significant. Dyson's biggest market globally is now Asia, where its intellectual property is quite often stolen or appropriated in fairly short order by cheap competitors based in the region, and there may be an element of concern there that has instructed these redundancy announcements. Now, it's worth pointing out that Dyson's global R&D headquarters will remain in Malmesbury in Wiltshire. Viewers with a longer memory will recall that a few years ago, Dyson moved its main manufacturing operations from the UK to lower cost bases in Singapore, but its research and development, which is the most high value added bit of the business, that does remain in the UK. And it's worth pointing out also that Dyson remains very, very committed to taking on new apprentices, which is something that it's invested quite heavily in recent years. I think the longer term backdrop to this is that a few years ago, Dyson was burned quite heavily when it moved into the electric vehicle segment. It spent some £2 billion on that, which it subsequently decided not to go ahead with, and the business has been run on a fairly tight ship since then. I'd also point out, again, in Mr. Kierna's statement there, he refers to the business having expanded very rapidly in recent years. Well, that's something that Dyson has in common with the wider tech sector across the United States in particular. Particularly after the pandemic, the tech sector expanded very, very rapidly, and since then, as the world has returned to normal, post the pandemic, you've seen a lot of the big players in tech, including the likes of Meta, the parent of Facebook, having to cut back on jobs where they overexpanded too quickly. And I think the news from Dyson today can be seen as part of that process as well.